worst movie ever. I couldn't believe we had just wasted 2 hours of our lives on that.
Dad grumbled, tossing the remote onto the coffee table with a heavy sigh. He had been looking forward to this movie night all week, and now it was ruined. The flickering screen went dark, silencing the cheesy groans of the monster we'd just endured. The room fell into an awkward silence, the kind that follows a collective disappointment. Even for a Frankenstein movie, it was bad. Like, really bad. The plot was nonsensical, the acting was wooden, and the special effects were laughable. The kind of bad where the monster looked more like a guy in a green Halloween mask than a reanimated corpse. It was almost as if they had raided a discount costume store at the last minute.
I thought it was kind of funny. I mean, who doesn't love a good laugh at a bad movie, right?
I said, trying to lighten the mood. Dad just groaned again, clearly not in the mood for humor. He'd hoped for a thrilling horror experience, not an unintentional comedy. My little brother Ben sat on the floor, eyes glued to the blank TV. He'd been the most excited about the movie, and now he seemed lost in thought. He wasn't fazed by Dad's assessment. In fact, he seemed to be in his own world, completely absorbed by what he had just seen. In fact, he seemed completely captivated. It was as if the terrible movie had sparked something in his imagination.
Ben? I called out, trying to snap him out of his trance.
I asked, nudging him with my foot. He didn't respond at first, still lost in his thoughts.
You okay? I asked again, this time with a bit more concern in my voice.
He blinked, then turned to me, his eyes wide and bright. It was as if he had just had the most brilliant idea.
I'm gonna make my own Frankenstein, he declared with a wild excitement that I hadn't seen in him before. It was clear that the terrible movie had ignited a spark of creativity in him.
We all looked at each other, unsure of what to say. The movie night had been a disaster, but maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of it. Over the next few days, Ben was a whirlwind of activity. He sketched out plans, gathered materials, and even roped me into helping him with his project. We spent hours in the garage, working on his version of Frankenstein. It was messy, chaotic, and a lot of fun. Mum and Dad watched with a mix of amusement and pride. They had been disappointed by the movie, but seeing Ben so engaged and creative made it all worth it. When Ben finally unveiled his creation, it was a sight to behold. It was far from perfect, but it was his, and he was incredibly proud of it. We all cheered and celebrated his achievement. The movie night mishap had turned into a memorable family project. In the end, it wasn't the movie that mattered, but the time we spent together and the creativity it inspired in Ben. Sometimes, even the worst experiences can lead to the best memories. Okay, let me back up a bit. My name is Max and I'm 12. My brother Ben is 10 and he's different. Not different in a bad way, just unique. He collects bugs, talks to his toast, and once tried to build a spaceship out of cardboard boxes and duct tape. So, yeah, him wanting to make a Frankenstein wasn't exactly out of character.
You mean like a Halloween costume?
I asked, hoping that's what he meant. Ben shook his head, his eyes still sparkling with that strange intensity.
No, a real one, like in the movie,
he said, his voice hushed with excitement. The next few days were interesting, to say the least. Ben's quest to create his own Frankenstein began innocently enough. He started by dissecting his old toys, scattering limbs and plastic organs across his bedroom floor. Our dog, Sparky, seemed to find this particularly entertaining, often running off with a stray robot arm or a plush unicorn head.
What are you doing, Ben?
I asked, stepping over a pile of stuffed animal fluff. Ben, perched on the floor amidst the carnage, looked up, a pair of pliers clutched in his hand.
I need their parts,
he explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. But then, things started to get weird. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Little things that you could easily dismiss as quirks or coincidences. But as the days went by, the strangeness grew, weaving itself into the fabric of our daily lives. Ben wasn't just ripping apart toys anymore. It was as if he had moved on to something more complex, more sinister. The toys were just the beginning, a mere prelude to what was to come. He started collecting other things. Dead leaves, twigs, even a dead spider he found in the bathtub. Don't ask, these weren't just random items. They seemed to hold some significance to him, a part of a larger, incomprehensible puzzle. He'd spend hours hunched over his creations in his room, muttering to himself. The room, once a place of innocent play, had transformed into a workshop of eerie experiments. The dim light cast long shadows, making the scene even more unsettling.
Whispering, "It's almost ready. Just a little more."
I tried to ask him what he was doing, but he'd just clam up, his eyes darting around nervously. It was as if he was afraid of something or someone. The once open and cheerful boy was now a bundle of nerves, constantly on edge. He was hiding something. I could feel it. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake off. It was like living with a stranger, someone I barely recognized. One night I heard a strange thumping coming from his room. It was a rhythmic sound, almost like a heartbeat, echoing through the silent house. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. It sounded like someone was jumping on his bed, but the sound was too steady, too deliberate. It wasn't the random noise of a child at play. It was something else entirely. Except when I peeked through the doorway, Ben was sitting perfectly still on the floor, his back to me. The room was dark, save for a faint glow from his makeshift workbench. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence. The thumping continued, slow and steady like a heartbeat. It was almost hypnotic, drawing me in, making me forget where I was. I stood there frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene before me. Ben's face was a mask of concentration, his eyes wide open, staring intently at something I couldn't see. There was an intensity in his gaze that sent chills down my spine. What was he looking at? What was he doing? On the workbench, I could make out a strange object, glowing faintly in the dim light. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, a bizarre amalgamation of the items he had been collecting. It pulsed with an eerie light in sync with the thumping sound. I wanted to reach out, to touch it, to understand what it was, but something held me back, a deep-seated fear that warned me to stay away. This was beyond my comprehension, something otherworldly. I stepped back from the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I closed the door quietly, not wanting to disturb whatever was happening in that room. As I walked away, the thumping sound continued, a haunting reminder of the mystery that lay within. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Ben, the strange object, the rhythmic thumping, it all played over and over in my mind. What was happening to my son? What had he gotten himself into? As the first light of dawn crept through the window, I made a decision. I had to find out the truth, no matter what it took. This was no longer just about Ben's odd behavior. It was about something much bigger, something that could change everything. With a newfound resolve, I prepared myself for the day ahead. I was determined to uncover the secrets that lurked in the shadows, to bring light to the darkness that had taken hold of our lives. The shift in the shadows was just the beginning. Ben's obsession with Frankenstein deepened. He began drawing creepy diagrams in his notebook. Body parts with wires sticking out, equations I couldn't understand, and the word life scrawled in big, jagged letters. He started talking in his sleep too, mumbling about electricity and bringing it to life.
Mumbling in sleep. Electricity. Bringing it to life.
One morning I even found a book on human anatomy hidden under his pillow.
Ben, you're starting to freak me out.
I confessed, trying to keep my voice light. He just shrugged, a secretive smile playing on his lips.
Don't worry, it'll all make sense soon.
But his words did little to ease my growing unease. This brings us to this past weekend. It was one of those weekends that you just know is going to be memorable, for better or worse. The kind where the air feels charged with the promise of adventure, or maybe mischief. Mum and Dad had to go out of town for an emergency, so guess who got stuck staying with Grandma? Yep, you guessed it, me and my little brother Ben. Now, don't get me wrong, we love Grandma, but her house is, well, let's just say it's not your typical Grandma's house. Ben and I are pretty close, despite our age difference. He's always tinkering with something, trying to invent the next big thing. I call him my little mad scientist in the making. And me? Well, I guess you could say I'm the more practical one, always trying to keep his experiments from blowing up the house. Now, our Grandma is, well, she's interesting too. She's not your typical cookie-baking, sweater-knitting grandma. No, She's more like the kind of grandma who reads tarot cards and has a collection of crystals that she swears can heal anything. Let's just say she's a firm believer in ghosts, aliens, and pretty much anything you'd find in a supermarket tabloid. She's got stories that would make your hair stand on end, and she tells them with such conviction that you almost believe her.
Grandma, we're here! We called out as we stepped inside her house, our voices echoing in the vast, dimly lit hallway.
I called out as we stepped inside her creaky old house. The floorboards groaned under our feet and the walls seemed to whisper secrets from the past. It was the kind of house that had a personality of its own, almost like it was alive. The scent of mothballs and something vaguely herbal hit me like a wall. It was a smell that was uniquely grandma's, a mix of old books, dried herbs, and a hint of something mysterious. Ben, surprisingly, seemed unfazed. He was too busy taking in the surroundings, his eyes wide with curiosity. He was unusually quiet, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. Maybe he was looking for one of Grandma's famous ghostly apparitions. Or perhaps he was just trying to figure out where she kept her latest batch of homemade cookies.
Soft chuckle. Welcome, my little scientists. Her voice was warm and inviting, yet it carried a hint of that same mystery that seemed to permeate the entire house.
She greeted us warmly, her eyes twinkling with that familiar, mysterious glint. It was the kind of look that made you feel like you were about to embark on an adventure, whether you wanted to or not. And with Grandma, you never really knew what to expect. One thing was for sure, though, this was going to be a weekend we wouldn't soon forget.